Hi, welcome to another episode of New Affairs, where we provide a platform to citizens to share their views and opinions on pressing national issues. On our personality profile segment today, we have a chat with one of Ghana's finest voices of conscience. Our guest today is a Ghanaian lawyer, academic, and activist. He's a co-founder of the civic movement Fix the Country and serves as a convener at the organization Democracy Hub. He studied at the University of Ghana, Harvard Law School, and is currently a PhD research student in law at the University of Cambridge, with a strong background as a policy advisor in Ghana and internationally. His public interest legal work includes suing state institutions for wrongful imprisonment, and his activism has placed him at the front lines of Ghana's debates on constitution making, justice reform, and environmental governance. If you haven't figured him out yet, then allow me to introduce Oliver Mausi Barker-Vormawor to you as our guest for today. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, I appreciate it. That's more even comprehensive than anything I've put together. I have to start using that as my bio going forward.
So I was going to ask if there's anything we've left out.
No, I mean, a lot of times people ask me to submit my bios for things. Mm-hmm. So at this point, I should subcontract you to be putting this together.
I think we can do it better, you know.
Absolutely.
I was actually very impressed when I first read a little bit about your bio somewhere. I think you've worked a little bit with the UN, right? And so when I read it, the first thing that came to mind was, so why would a gentleman like this decide to, leave all that and pursue national interest at the expense of his own things? And I was like, wow, it's so interesting.
I mean, listen, I'm not surprised you say that. I hear this quite often. Mm-hmm. I do think, though, that we are a culture that is raised to be impressed by these things. Right. And I think I've also said time and time again that I've also lived that culture, right? Where credentialism, where CV packing and things like that gain you some sort of respectability in society. Whereas there's nothing much more fulfilling and productive now when I'm not living for self and not seeking, individual professional aggrandizement, but rather in the service of humanity, in the service of others, where I am interested about the well-being of my fellow citizens. I'm interested about the health of our republic. I'm interested in, how this nation can rise above its current station. That, to me, is even much more fulfilling work. It's more noble. It's living beyond yourself. And I do hope that the culture evolves towards even, better appreciation of those who put themselves at the service of the state in that regard.
Wow. That's just impressive. It's so hard to find people who are wholly committed, especially if there are people who have schooled so much like you are. You are currently doing your PhD, and we'll get into that at a much later time. But because of our time, I just want to find out. You grew up in Akuse, America, right?
Yes, I did.
So what made you think that at some point in time you were going to become an agent of change? You would be who you are today. Yeah. I mean, Oliver Barker-Vormawor.
Yeah.
What gave you that awakening?
It's funny because I grew up in very strange circumstances. Mm-hmm. Essentially with a single dad. My dad was raising me alone. And when I grew up, I was born in 86. So 88, 89 is when, there was pressure on the Rawlings, the PNDC then to transition towards democracy. And one of the things they did in the beginning was to try to do the district assembly concept, the district assembly election,
right,
as they called it, as a way of testing democracy at the grassroots level. So my father was the first assemblyman elected for America.
Oh wow!
And I have pictures of him where he's carrying me. Incidentally, I'm wearing military fatigue as a 2-3-year-old while he's going to vote, and he's voting at the polling station. And I've always reflected on the significance of that. But it means that I also grew up in an environment where, for many rural communities, Assemblyman was everything. You came to him from everything.
That's true.
It was through his letters and his advocacy that my community got electricity for the first time. I think the significance of Assemblyman has diminished over the period. But everybody, when problems needed to be solved, they came to him. And in the shadow of that, I was then being referred to as the Assemblyman's child. So when people saw me, they call me Assembly, or they call me Assembly.
Right.
So, this thing. So the sense of being committed to or having an idea of social responsibility towards one's community
has always been there.
I think formed early on, right? because that's all I saw around me. Did I have a perspective as to whether or not I was going to be doing this in the long term? I don't necessarily think so. Even though I was civic-minded enough, I think I was also grew up in an environment where my parents were very focused on me reading and applying myself in school. I never quite did, though. You'll be surprised. Through my early formative years, I wasn't very, how would I call it? Studious as a person. I would read wild. I won't stay in class. My academic interest was wide beyond what the school was offering.
No,
right?
It's not surprising.
So I wouldn't necessarily be, I didn't care to be first or anything in class. Like, I'd hang out with all the people who thought it was bad boys. I would sneak out of school. Like, so I had significant academic interest, but never really in terms of the structured curricula. I think later on, I began to find a way to blend both. But it was never the thinking that this is what I was going to be or in this position. In fact, if anything, and I must confess this, that I was interested in politics at the point, because I remember when I was a child, a lot of times people would ask me what I wanted to be, and I said I wanted to be president. And so that's what a lot of people called me. They either called me professor or president, right?
Interesting.
But if anything did any good for me is that I left the country when I was 16, right after high school.
16?
Yes.
To
Morocco. I lived in Morocco.
Okay.
And the social distancing from our politics made me reevaluate politics itself and the partisanship and all of that, and made me understand that the path forward to social progress was not necessarily coming and running for elections in a traditional way, but we have to change our society in a particular way, and I'm not sure, the voting culture we have does that, but it is possible to be able to mobilize people, is able to speak to people and make them believe that, we can do different. And I think that's the kind of path I ended up taking at the end of the day.
Wow. We would love to go so much into your personal life, but we'll come to that maybe at a later time.
No problem.
I want to find out, what exactly do you want from the Ghanaian government? You seem to be on the government's nerve. What exactly do you want from the Ghanaian?
I think I want more from the Ghanaian people than I want from the Ghanaian government.
More from the Ghanaian people than from the Ghanaian government.
I think that a lot of the times people ask me, the target of my advocacy is the people. Because I do believe that we haven't been able to, first of all, show the full extent of our citizenship. We have been accepting of our lot. We haven't come to terms with what it means to live in true dignity as a people. That it's certain things that we celebrate and let the politics go. That if more people were interested in the project of standing up to the full extent of their citizenship, that we can change society way beyond even what the government allows us to do. So that's where I focus on. I focus on speaking to people. I'm interested in mobilizing people. I'm interested in how people are affected by what I'm saying and believing. I want my life to be lived as a model for which people can see that, maybe there's something different about this person that they feel inclined to join or take up their own causes. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. I want Ghanaians to take up their citizenship.
Wow. So, if I understand clearly what you mean, when Ghanaians are able to take their rightful places as citizens and not spectators, as our past president said, it will automatically put government in check. Is that it?
Absolutely. It will completely transform our society. Like this morning I was listening to the radio and there was conversation around, topical issue Galamsey as well. And the host kept saying, wow, when I'm listening to you guys on the NDC side, you sound almost like these people were. And what you were saying before has completely changed. And I thought to myself, it's because there are no consequences, right? The people do not exact any consequences for these kind of speech. The people, when they step out, for instance, when there's a couple of 2 or 3 arrests, they don't realize that that's how power operates. Power will try to back down or cause people who are demanding difference from it to back down. And then we back down. And then, our dysfunction, our lack of dignity becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy because we don't act on it and we are like, wow, when will Ghana change? But Ghana on its own won't. As a concept.
Do you feel it's as a result of fear on the part of the Ghanaian citizen?
I think the power has nothing but fear. Power weaponizes fear. I think that when power displayed me in handcuffs and other people, it is weaponizing that fear for people to continue to believe that, you know what, you have to be afraid. But for change to happen, you have to break the fear. And there's stories in our past where that fear was broken. When Nkrumah and others were being jailed, they came out of jail and they work kept for themselves called prison graduates.
Yeah.
They were breaking the fear in people's mindsets that prison is nothing, right? That's all the oppressor has, the colonizer has over us. So we'll show up. And I think that if we're not able to break that fear, we'll be stuck in this rut, you know? So yeah, so I completely agree that fear exists, but it exists for a reason. And we must recognize why it exists and operates in the way in which it does. If not, we'll then succumb to its demobilizing power over us.
Because it appears to me as though Ghanaians are ready and willing to show up for any and everything except their own future.
Yeah.
When you look at, the events that are organized yearly, occasionally and all that, and the numbers, the teeming numbers, thousands of people, Ghanaians show up, it clearly tells that they are there. It's not as if they don't have the time to engage in demonstrations and all that, but it appears they simply do not care or they are afraid. And so it's been something that has been on my mind.
It is deliberate cultural messaging, though. It's deliberate cultural messaging. Like, you try to step out. So many young people talk about, how many times won't family call you that don't go anywhere, don't do this?
Right.
I remember one of our protests, I think it was the Occupy Jilobi, when there was incidentally, around 37, there was a trotro that couldn't move because we were there. And then some people started fighting in there. Some woman and the trotro mate started fighting in there, right? So we went in to try to figure out what was going on. And the woman was talking about how the trotro mate was insulting us who were protesting, that we don't have anything better to do with our lives. And she was speaking up against it. So we started working with her, and she was talking about how she had 3 kids who are out of the university, don't have any jobs.
The irony.
And then she said, this is the beautiful part. She says, I completely support what you're doing. In fact, my children were going to come, and I told them to sit at home. But I support what you're doing.
Wow. Where's the support coming from?
Yes. And even I received calls, even for protests I've organized, where families telling me, don't go for today, leave other people to do it. And it's just that there's a cultural self-preservation ethic to how we have raised ourselves to believe, right? And so, nobody, if there's anything, constantly I'm being asked, is Ghana worth dying for? And never the question of, what else is worth living for, if not for our own dignity?
So is Ghana worth dying for?
I don't think that we have to construct a republic where people must pay the ultimate price with their lives. People deserve to live in a republic that recognizes their dignity. That the act of speaking up, the act of demanding better should not come at the cost of our lives. That's the republic I want to see. And that process, for us to get there, we must stand up and we must show our force collectively. So if we individualize ourselves, it becomes easy to pick us apart because one person is showing up. And a perfect example of Ghanaian solidarity is when we were arrested the last time and there was Free the Citizens, where other come up, right? It shows a sense of solidarity that we must continue to replicate and reproduce constantly, because then the regime would back down. But if it is people are left with their devices, something happens and there's no show of, communal mobilizing against the government, they'll do what they want.
Do you see yourself ever getting tired of doing this activism? Do you see yourself ever backing out at some time in the future?
It's a question I ask myself a lot of the times. In the past, I've said that, I want to give 15 years of my life to this, and at some point I must retire as well. And that's at the end of the 15 years, you must take stock and realize that so many more people have come up and that there's a lot of people carrying the torch. I think I'll be disappointed if at the end of my life, I still feel a sense of a lone voice in some regard. That what I'm saying has not become so ordinary. That it has become the way of life of our people. That would be disappointing, I would think. But I don't think that my moral outrage against the system and what we have constructed would go away. I think that my body will become frail. I think that I will not be able to, go on a 3-day demonstration.
At some point.
So that is anticipated. It's human frailty. But my hope is that more people show up. And so I am committing as much of my energy now to that cause of affecting people's thinking around this now, when I have the energy.
Right. I appreciate your thoughts on that. Democracy Hub is planning to host a National Youth Forum on constitutional reforms. Are you satisfied with what the government has done so far with respect to refining Ghana's constitution? And why organize such a program?
I've been here before, right? When Mayors did the Constitution Review Commission, I was the youngest member of the commission at the time. I was 22. And
you were already a lawyer then?
Well, not in Ghana. I was a lawyer outside of Ghana. Okay. I was yet to be called to the Ghanaian bar.
Okay.
I postgraduate education in law already.
Okay.
And I've never felt a sense of enthusiasm as a young person in being in the deliberations, the discussions, how we're primarily a young team as well, thinking about a provision, seeing what are the problems with it. Even if we change it, how are the ways in which politicians can weaponize it? We have to think about another way to frame, that product of work. It felt like rebuilding a different society. And then when the report was over 1,000-page report, and then the politics took it nowhere. So I became apprehensive that we can go into this fine exercise of trying to craft a new vision for ourselves, and then it will become stillborn. So I am committed to avoiding that scenario now. It means that we must galvanize as much of our people to support the project of constitutional reform, to make it the people's demand, as a way to discipline our politics. And so that's what I think the National Youth Convention is supposed to do.
Okay.
We are going to be the majority of the electorate in deciding the constitutional future of this country. We must understand the issue. We must make our voices weigh in the process. And I think democracy has to be intentional. Since we are occupying now a particular, space in terms of, at least I like to believe that a lot of young people trust that we actually in this for the good of the country, that we can convene such a conversation and see the product of it ultimately.
I'm actually interested in how you ended up on the committee as a 22-year-old. But I would also want to find out, are you confident in the work you did? And do you have any regrets that it was banned?
If I had any regrets, I think that the committee spent way too much time worried about whether the politicians were going to accept this or not. And at the end of the day, there were certain things where the commission was not bold enough. Okay? Because we were so fixated on, these politicians will not accept this, compromises, that we didn't put our best foot forward. And I've told the same to the prep committee, that if there's anything I'm expecting, don't count on that. Because at the end of the day, even when we compromised, the report went nowhere. So put your finest and bravest ideas this thing, and let us do the work of galvanizing public support around those ideas in order to push the politics to accept them. So that's kind of how I see the tax forward.
Do you actually advocate for a totally new constitution or a reformed one?
Our position has been Democracy Hub that we have been campaigning on a new constitution for a new generation. But we have been supportive of the process of amendment. The reason why we have continually supported it is also, there are two things here. It's about structure and it's about process. And I'll explain quickly, okay? Structure, because when you take the current constitution, it's divided into two parts, entrenched provisions and non-entrenched provisions.
Right.
How you can amend existing provisions. There's no room for how you can add a new provision.
Okay.
There's a structural deficit there, right? It's not clear to us also, as it exists, there's no pathway, like in Kenya, where citizens can mobilize signatures and cause a referendum on a constitutional issue. Our constitution does not give us that power. We must go back to parliament, the same people, for them to decide whether or not we want to stop MPs being ministers. What do you think they're going to say? We want to go back to the Council of State to say that we must delete the Council of State. So that's the issue there. The other thing is also a process question. One of the biggest problems when we finished the Constitution Review Commission was that there were over 1,000 recommendations. And the question is, are you going to put 1,000 questions at referendum for people to vote? It's impractical.
Impossible.
So we say, we'll redraft a whole new document, and we'll go and appoint that document as we did in 1992, and we do the same thing as a document. It doesn't mean everything in it must change, but it means that we can then better effect the changes we look to do. But currently now, under the current provisions, to even introduce the question to referendum, you need at the very least 7 months, because you must publish in the Gazette, wait 6 months, go to Council of State and all of that. If we were to take provision by provision, and let's be modest and say that this committee comes up with only 30 recommendations, that's 30 years to effect all of that.
Yeah, it will take another 30 years.
It's impractical. Yeah. So that's kind of why we were suggesting that maybe a different approach is better for the process.
Well, I mean, this is so rich, but because of the things that we want to discuss, we may not be able to go into one particular issue too much.
I know.
Let's talk about the current government's let me say, flagship agenda, which is the Operation Recover or Loot.
Yeah.
I know that you in particular, and almost every Ghanaian is so keen on seeing the government execute that perfectly.
Yeah.
I would want to find out if you see oral chopping any successes. I mean, in our judicial system, it appears as if it is very easy to, convict someone who has stolen a pile of cocoa yams, than to convict a politician who has stolen millions. How do you reconcile it? Do you see oral chopping any successes, especially knowing that your very good friend is in government? Now I'm talking about Justice Shemsai, yes.
Yeah. I'll say this. The Fourth Republic is a republic of plunder. We've plundered the Ghanaian, and that the only way to fixing this state is to have the fear. We have to instill the fear of taking the public thing. And if we're not able to do that, then by God, this republic must fail. Because it cannot continue to disenfranchise and live. Our entire peace is dependent on the civility and, how do I even put it? People who are poor and disenfranchised accepting their poverty and not doing anything about it. Because the people can revenge against the state. And we are seeing that revenge in the Galamsey, when the people are saying that, you know what, we have been left behind, and so we are attacking the environment. It can get worse for us as a republic. So oral is fundamental, and I completely, believe in the philosophy of it. Now, of course, we must remind ourselves that the government that the ADC has created is no different in many respects from the government that the MPP created. They believe in plunder and have lived a life of plunder. So even when they say these things, we must make sure that it's not just rhetoric. To get people like us, who are the ordinary Ghanaian, to believe that they want to do something, we must actually match with them to ensure it does this. Now, I have always said that there's no one single individual, including my very good friend, Justice Shemsai, who is so good that they don't require accountability. They don't require checks. They don't require being pushed. So you would see that I have consistently pushed the AG's department on oral, irrespective of our friendship.
Right.
Then when we have conversation, my suggestions and ideas to him is constantly how to improve the fight. What are the things? When I've weighed in, it's how to be supportive in that process. So I am mobilizing, civic voices to demand and let them remind them that this is more important to us than anything. And I offer ideas.
And are you impressed with whatever they have done so far? I mean, the AG's office.
Absolutely not. I don't think
you are not impressed.
No, I am not.
Why?
Listen, I think that what my expectations and what I'm asking for, in fact, the expectations of many Ghanaians, is not a belief. I mean, we are at 6 or 7, maybe cases. By the ordinary way of doing things, we will be fine with this. I think we can do more. I think that the office can be better reinforced. I think that we can galvanize the people to see oral at work more. I think that we can bring in the public tribunal so that ordinary people are in the process.
I was actually going to ask you about that.
Ordinary people must be in the process of, this is their justice. And I have been in the court system. I don't believe that the judges themselves necessarily hold a measure of what justice means and what it means for a person to go hungry. I don't think so. We have seen the justice that the courts dispense. They target the poor. So if we want to break the fear of the rich and powerful, empower the people. So I believe in those measures. I'm not seeing them deployed to galvanize us in the process. And that's what I think is a real shame.
You have actually just thrown me out of my line of questioning because of numerous things you are saying now.
Yeah.
So you made a comment about the Fourth Republic failing if oral fails.
Yeah.
And then you have also mentioned or made a comment about bringing back the public tribunals.
Yeah.
I want to go back into history, the PNDC, Chairman Rawlings' era, where we saw the public tribunals, and then bringing it back now, as well as your comment on the Fourth Republic. What is your idea of the Fourth Republic failing when you say that? I've seen you make a post on that.
Listen, I think that, and I've said this now, that there's a logic to the Fourth Republic as it exists now, that we have relative peace because those who are disenfranchised accept their status and do nothing about it. But the gap between the haves and have-nots is widening. The more and more young people are being excluded from the process. Young people now, most people have to find a way to fend for themselves in the craziness of a system that does not protect them. How long do you think people are going to accept that as a bargain of the society in which they live? And when they don't accept it anymore, then what? So the underlying logic of what the Fourth Republic politics is, which is that the elite plunder from us, must change. Whether or not it affects the democratic system itself, and I'm a lover of democracy. I hope it doesn't get there. That's why I'm calling for reform now. It's for us to see.
How interesting, because I'm sure you yourself, that people have, critics, your
Yeah.
critics have said that
Yeah.
you are a coup monger
Yeah.
and all that. How do you feel about that, especially when
Yeah.
you have made comments that make people think or feel that indeed you are a coup monger?
I need to be clear. The only people who fear coup are those, the elites in power who do not want change.
Wow.
I completely agree. So every time coup has happened in this country, ordinary Ghanaians have cheered it. The elites ran through the borders and out. They find themselves in jail. So the people who then control the mechanisms of public information are the ones who are making the people believe that accountability on them of any measure is unacceptable. But I've always said that I believe in a democracy. I believe in a democracy because I believe in the power of dissent, the ability to tell people in the eye that you are wrong. And any system that promises to protect the dissenter, the person who says that, I think there's something wrong here, that's the system that I subscribe to. But I don't subscribe to a system a system that lacks accountability. So if our sense and our reality of the Fourth Republic is that a system where the elites get away with it, then by God it must end.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that we cannot build in this place a different system, a democratic system. So unless our reality is that democracy is, elite and accountability, and that's the way in which you must accept, then give me anything else.
What then is your method in seeing the Fourth Republic end seeing the Fourth Republic end if oral doesn't succeed? Picking up guns, insurrection, revolt, demonstrations. What is your method?
It's interesting. I do think that it will end in ways which are less predictable than we think. I think that they're going to have more high crime. When I say more high crime, I mean that because people have become so disenfranchised, what we're going to see is that when people within different communities lack, they turn on themselves. People are more likely to rob their neighbor than they rob somebody far away. So more high crime. We see that people are going to turn against the environment. That is already happening with Galamsey. We don't know how to fix it because the people have turned their hunger against the environment. And no amount of rational thinking, no amount of mercury is poisoning us off is going to change that. Those are the incidents that I am seeing as the end of the Fourth Republic, which I believe is already in motion. So the quality of life that
you believe the end of the Fourth Republic is already in motion?
It's already rolling out before our very eyes. So the challenge to get it back is what I'm talking about, is what we must do. But we already think about, and of course, when all these things are unraveling, there's going to be an elite that is going to ask more questions of the political system that we have created and say that this is insufficient. And that they must overthrow that system, whether they believe that overthrow must come through the ballot box and the constellation of better ideas and better demands on those who are in leadership. That's what we want. But we must remember that history has never played what is the safest and the most, peaceful part in the face of decline. Sometimes it becomes violent. But it's not that I am desiring violence. I am preaching to you, like Elijah was doing in the wilderness and telling you that, listen, we must repent or this is what is going to happen. And that's kind of what I fear is happening.
Right. And so with respect to, or going back to the public tribunals, our judicial system, our justice system seems to be so slow. So it is only fast when, it concerns a poor person who has nobody to defend him, nobody to defend them. And you have been one of the people going out there doing pro bono services for people like that. What really is the reason why our justice delivery system is so slow? Prosecution can take years, especially when it concerns politicians.
Yeah.
And what do you think is that change that the public tribunals will bring to board?
So two things there. One, I think that is deliberately slow.
Deliberately slow?
Yes, because it's part of the elite culture for it to be like that. Okay? Everybody within, and I know people within the NDC now who are in official position, many of them lawyers who were defending corrupt officers from the last regime, who employed that slowness to great advantage. That delayed almost the entirety of those cases, and then they turn around and then they drop those charges. And then you have the, government officials of the old regime who are going out in defense of their colleagues who have been accused and weaponizing the same process. We've seen these players with Atachia, who was minister, who's doing the same thing in the Edu Boahin trial. Those techniques is what they have, the system has created and allowed to. It doesn't mean that we can't block them. We can't block them. And if we haven't blocked them, well, then why? I give the example. The gold board bill was passed within like 3 weeks.
Yeah. It's so possible, and
there's so much systemic ideas of reform that none of them have been actioned on, a year on. Why not those, but why others? Particularly in an era where the government has 2/3 majority. This is a mandate to change the constitution. That hasn't happened. So, naturally, and when they come on, they speak is, but things have to go slow. Things don't have to go in a particular dynamic unless you have kept them in a particular dynamic. Our justice is not patient. It's deliberately weaponized to be slow, to break down. And I've been in the course and I've seen this happen. That's why I believe that the people who have more urgency, who can recognize frivolous arguments when they are presented to them, would not countenance some of the techniques that, because the law itself has molded itself in the image of the dysfunctional society. So the nature of our law and the legal practice reflects the society itself. But if the people have no patience for those kinds of techniques, we'd better go forward with them. So that's kind of what I believe and why I'm calling for the public tribunals.
I get the sense that you seek to insinuate that now Ghana has, the ruling party has 2/3 majority in parliament. So I get the sense from all that you are saying that if the definite things do not change now, then it's not going to change again. Is that really it?
No, I don't think so. You see, the people have been experimenting, and perhaps people have not been realizing. They went for a split parliament. So maybe we have gone, every time the government is in power, government has a majority. We experimented with the split parliament, and we got very little from the split parliament. Now we have given the ruling government a mandate that no other government has ever been able to get ever before, because we want to see what they do with it. Now, if our hopes are disappointed again, I don't know what the next level of experimentation would look like. But the people are constantly, every time we go to the polls, the people are doing something different, constantly. So for me, I think that even if this doesn't succeed, this is a great opportunity that people are pressing for. And if we make change through civic means impossible, then what are we inviting people to do? So that's kind of what I keep thinking about, that we must seize the opportunity as we get it now and not wait for what other experimentation that people have in stock.
Right. Still on justice delivery system in Ghana, so many people, in fact, have said that the office of the special prosecutor should be scrapped. Yeah. They are not seeing its usefulness. Yeah. But you are one of the people who recently have said that time should be given that office to put proper structures in place.
Yeah.
Are the already existing prosecutorial bodies not enough? Yeah. Why the need for the OSP? And what are the successes? What is the usefulness of the OSP in your opinion? Why you think it should be kept?
The truth of why we created the OSP is because we as a society, we are running from something which we are not able to acknowledge. And we think that we can use superficial measures to fix it. So the OSP was created in this idea that it is going to be politically neutral. Because we have lost belief and hope that the police, that the YOCO, that the Attorney Generals can have the professionalism of office and the commitment to the Constitution to be able to act upon it and not look at their friends. And that's why we kind of created that office. So it is like we are not fixing that problem. We then want to create a
exactly almost new change
and a new thing, and hoping that works. And then it's caught up in the sea of the same system. They're supposed to function with them.
Right.
Those systems are supposed to be on their same board and things like that. So what I'm saying is not necessarily that I think that the experimentation of the OSP is the key to our dysfunction. I think that the bigger dysfunction exists in some place.
Which is?
But I want... I'll come there.
Yeah.
I want us to move away from this idea that we've scrapped, we create a new, we do what? We do... That idea where we are constantly thinking that some tinkering of something else is going to produce the change is what I want us to avoid from.
Right.
The problem itself is the lack of social consequences for those who do this to us.
A weak justice delivery system.
A weak justice delivery system, right? The OSP comes and says that the judges are sabotaging it. The OSP actually held a press conference and says the judicial system is sabotaging the fight against corruption.
Wow.
We haven't reflected enough on the significance of what that means for us as a people. And what's our response? Scrap you. Right? Because we are refusing to confront the demons themselves. So I want it to be there. And let's have a conversation about the demons we are refusing to confront.
So in your opinion, what do you think should be done so that these systemic failures will be checked?
I speak to the people. the politics, the elites are not interested in this. I want more mobilized activity from people. I want more people to show up. I want more people to organize themselves into clubs, into different kinds of societies that take on an issue and push the general public towards those. So, because the elite won't do it.
So change must come from the people.
From the bottom up.
Wow.
It must come from the bottom up. But the challenge we have, and if we get it right, is that the challenge is not that so many people are not angry at the system. If we had that, then our work is even difficult. People are angry about the system. People are disenfranchised by this system. They want it to change. That's a good place. The challenge then is the mobilizing capacity, our mobilizing capacity to bring those energies together. Sadly, the only people who have been able to build a structure to mobilize people are the same elites who are, through their political parties, have branches in every local assembly, every district, every community. We within the rational society must be able to replicate those structures for civic mobilization. If not, we're always going to be on the back burner.
Let's move into some other issues. So about legal affairs and all that. Is it really the case that the immunity granted our presidents, in our laws, does not permit them to be prosecuted and possibly jailed at all? Is that really the case?
The immunity they have, and interesting, I'll come back to this immunity question, is that we as a people have 3 years after they leave office to bring charges against them, hold them accountable for their terrible leadership. And if we don't do that, that's it.
3 years immediately after they leave?
Immediately after. So when you see politicians immediately campaigning strongly, whether it is in connection with breaking the 8 or wanting their party to succeed them, it's because the party logic is not going to go after their own people. That's how they've preserved it. So that by the time the first term would have expired, that 3 years would have expired, and this person becomes completely untouchable by the kind of, constitutional framework we have set up. So that's a big challenge, and it must go, because for every other citizen, crime doesn't expire. It doesn't matter if you did it in 1986. They'll go after you if it's become discoverable. So I think that's obviously something that needs to go in terms of the ongoing reviews and reform that we have on board. But yeah, that's the biggest, it's a big issue as to the fact that we even have that framework to exist in the first place.
And so, I want to ask this, and it's in connection with what has happened in France just a few weeks back, where the former French president has already started his jail term. Yeah. And I'm linking this to, former President Akufo-Addo. You have made a post about him, about time running out and all that. And clearly, he has been accused of supervising and probably abusing his powers as president with respect to the cathedral issue, as well as the bondholders' funds and all that.
Yeah.
Do you see him possibly serving a jail term in a working system?
During COVID, when these presidents had passed a law which gave him enormous powers, and people were jailed for breaking COVID violations, they organized a funeral which broke every COVID protocol. So Fix the Country petitioned the police asking for them to be investigated. And we said the president's immunity while in office is an immunity from prosecution, not from investigation. You can investigate him, build your dossier. Once he leaves office, you charge him. And many media people will call and say, is it realistic that you expect the president and the vice and some party functionaries to resign? I said, but the Minister of Health in the UK didn't resign. Boris Johnson resigned over a smaller party, which didn't see any proportions of what we have. So even in the whole of the people and those who communicate on their behalf, we are not even able to imagine and create the imagination around holding, political elites accountable in this regard. So I think that is a test case for how far we have to push accountability for we as a people to become culturally normalize that they too are human, that the excesses that we have seen in the past 8 years have to be investigated, and the president must face the justice like everybody else. And I genuinely believe that. If I was in a position to do that, I would do that.
And do you think that he actually, in your opinion, looking at the things that he did as president, I think you suffered the most part of your deals under his government and all that. You see him really serving a jail term when there's a working system, a sharp justice delivery system. That's
absolutely. I don't think that there's something inherently wrong with us. Mm-hmm. as a people that we cannot build a justice system that holds everybody accountable. The French have done it. The French are not the most organized people, but they have done it. They're not the only country that have sent people to jail. South Korea has done it. Japan has done it. So many countries have done it. South Africa has done it. Jacob Zuma was in jail. So it is not even on the continent, there's precedent for this, right? So it's really a question of, okay, who controls the mechanisms for making that a reality?
Right.
The people who have then gotten themselves into some kind of elite consensus and who make it seem impractical. But in fact, it's very practical for this to happen.
Right. Now, to some more important issues, I mean, similarly important. We are running out of time, but they're also important. There have been reports recently about investor confidence waning in Ghana.
Yeah.
And some of the reasons they have attributed to it is President Mohammed's alliance with the Sahel junta states. They have said that there are of course, the Chief Justice's removal, as well as some allegations of media repression. Do you think these are just imperialist tactics to, bring down the image of President Mohammed's government, or they actually hold some water?
I think that I have long objected to this idea that our economies must live in perpetual audition for the foreign investor. We've created this. If we didn't do this within our minds, within our oil extraction, the critical sectors of our economy, the people won't feel so left behind. Much of our economy, about 86% of our economy, is controlled by foreigners. Even our retail business and our import business is controlled not by Ghanaians. Our provisions to the state in terms of what the state procures, is whether it's from electricity to everything, is controlled by foreigners. The vast majority of wealth that is made in this country is made for another person. Those investors are there because it works for them. So the way forward for us is not necessarily a society that's so fixated economically about foreign investment, but how we can capacitate the domestic entrepreneur. So that in itself, I haven't seen any metric, I haven't seen any language that shows that as a metric of how the government is doing better, more generally. And that's what I want to focus on. I don't necessarily buy that belief in that perpetual audition for foreign capital. I think that we haven't capacitated the local, and that's what I'm interested in.
And then also you have made a comment about foreigners, foreign investors, people in the diaspora losing their investment in Ghana.
Yeah.
And especially looking at what's happening now with the CEO of Springfield, Mr. Kevin Ochre, as well as Nana Kwame Bediako's comments on him about Ghana not being able to protect its entrepreneurs and investors. What are your thoughts on that?
We need to be very clear that the economic class that we have, we shouldn't, and we have done this before in the past, because when we sacked the white man, we replaced him with black oppressors, people who share our skin tone, and then we call them brothers. We have to be very clear that some people within the economic class themselves are persons who are scavengers. Okay? So when I'm calling for capacitating the local, I am interested in capacitating the honest businessman. Now, I am not saying this to say that the gentleman at the center of Springfield, that I am sufficiently aware of what charges he's facing. But I want to be clear that when somebody has been arrested for allegations that these people have filed with Yoko, there are allegations that Yoko has not sufficiently moved on those files, which compel them to seek other jurisdiction. We are in fact shooting ourselves in the foot. I represent, a class of individuals who lost significant money to a company called Sukasa here in, around East Legon Hills, where they have done everything to try to get the state to act on their behalf. The failure of the state to protect the Ghanaian who invests, who puts their money in. And I talked about Ghanaians in the diaspora and things like that. A lot of the time they lose money and they can't look at the justice system to make them whole. Those are the problems that makes it difficult for people to be able to trust and express themselves entrepreneurially in the country. So the better thing is not that a person like Springfield, the CEO of Springfield, cannot be arrested, but I would prefer that he's arrested by Ghanaian authorities.
Than in Dubai.
Yes, exactly. That shows that our own systems are working and have no regard for money or power.
I cannot let you go without taking your thoughts on this. President Trump, out of nowhere, has issued a serious threat to Nigeria. Personally, I just cannot understand how.
You know?
You already want to make a comment on that. Let's hear
Trump is an embodiment of something very pernicious about Western superiority culture. And we are seeing that expressed in itself in the language he's used vis-a-vis us. We've seen that in deliberateness about his politics. We've seen how he's undermined some of the greatest liberation story on the continent, which is the fight against apartheid, by claiming that there's a reverse genocide against Afrikaners in South Africa. It's an intentional project. And I'm seeing that happen in Nigeria as well. It is not to say that the Nigerian state is perfect. And I'll give this example because we don't have much time.
Right.
That I remember when Zimbabwe was having its troubles, and I was in the UK, and a UK member of parliament stood up in parliament and said whether the solution to Zimbabwe is for us to recolonize Zimbabwe. And I was talking to so many Zimbabwean lawyers and experts who were discussing the problems of Zimbabwe in the terms that were familiar. Excessive use of force and things like that. Why is the problem of, the global south that the West must feel that they must recolonize us to teach us better how to govern? We cannot solve our own problems in the same way. That's kind of what I'm seeing, that's logic of perpetual superiority, even though their own systems are fractured. Even though the win of Zora Mondani shows you about the level of economic disparity that lives within the body of the country that they run. So we have problems of our own, and I believe in the genuity of our people. That's why I speak to our people to rise up and fix those problems. But I don't think that the solution comes from somebody who, by colonial heritage, believes that they know better how to fix our societies for us.
We are wrapping up, but I want to come in with this because you mentioned Zoran Kwame Mamdani.
Yeah.
I mean, people have criticized him as being a jihadist and a communist advocate. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, our freedom fighters and those who liberated us were criminals. They were put in jail. So we have to be very careful who labels your heroes. I think that the language he's speaking, that has been very clear. Bibi Netanyahu is somebody who there's an international arrest warrant for him. Of course, he's a war criminal. There's nothing, how do you call it, extremist by recognizing what the international community has recognized, that genocide is happening in Gaza. If genocide is happening in Gaza, there are people who are committing the genocide. To hold them accountable is not an extremist. The mere fact that he's a Muslim doesn't mean that he's anything but what he's calling for. When he says globalize the intifada is the struggle. We are a society which is built on the notion of a global intifada, which is what? The independence of Ghana is not complete until this is linked with the liberation of the entire continent.
Right.
Meaning that we were being called upon to internationalize our liberation struggle, which means that we must show solidarity to what is happening in Palestine. That's the culture in which we grew up in.
Right.
So I completely see him channeling the spirit of the person who says this very words as well. I'm not surprised that those who have expressed discomfort with it are those who want to maintain the status quo.
Right, very well. Before we let you go, how's your PhD going in the US?
Oh my goodness, I've talked publicly about the years of my passport being taken away from me means that I've lost my scholarship. So now I have
lost your scholarship.
Yes, I have to both work and work, but I have to cover that as well at the same time. But
you're still schooling.
I am still completing it.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mr. Oliver Mause Barker-Vormawor has been our guest. A change agent, a constitutional reform enthusiast, an activist, and a passionate lover of Ghana. We appreciate your time. My name is Nusinyo Dodio, and I've been your host for today. Thank you.